Welcome to the Health Tech Crew podcast, where innovation meets health. I'm your host, Igor Gorlatov. Today, we are honored to have a leader, Alex Y, who left Humana to launch Carenodes. With focus on technological innovation, contracting, and advisory services for health tech companies, Carenodes is making a lasting impact on the healthcare ecosystem, driving revenue, stimulating local economies. Let's dive in and explore our guest's dedication to collaboration, guidance, and accelerated growth. So, hello, Alex.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Health Tech Crew podcast. So, I know that you created Carenodes, and I wanted to ask, what was the initial spark or idea that led you to leave a comfy corporate job at Humana and start a new company?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity to engage in dialogue. I come from a long line of healthcare administration and an extensive background. I was managing 48 clinics across California and Texas. That was 28 first. We grew it to 48, providing largely primary care, mental health, substance abuse treatment services, gastroenterology, and ophthalmology in certain locations. Thereafter, I moved to Cardinal Health, where I was responsible for Dignity and HCA hospital bundle payment performance in the Medicare pilot program in Southern California. We did well, my team and I, in that project. So Humana recruited me to oversee contracting and network management for the West side of the country. So as you indicated, late 2018, I decided to leave Humana largely because of some of the successes I had with my team implementing network management strategies and bringing the plan to compliance with several requirements at the Medicare CMS level. And I thought to myself, wow, a lot of this was manual, and a lot of this I feel like could be automated, or at least spreadsheets could be abolished. And so I left to start initially a health technology organization to really support administrative functions in healthcare management. COVID hit not too long thereafter, and I was serving as interim chief operating officer of a behavioral health group. And I started to build a fractional CXO portfolio. And today, Carenodes has evolved into having an advisory arm where we have consulting, we have expert networks, we have the fractional leadership network, and operational support, where we actually will kind of plug in to a health system and help them with their health insurance contracting and provider network management. And not only in terms of advising or guiding, but also providing the staff and the support team to really operationally support the endeavor that the system might be embarking upon.
When we talked prior to this, you mentioned such a word as acting almost like an accelerator for digital health startups, helping them go from some incubation periods and into those contracts that they need to have. Could you talk a little bit about the overall model? In what way is it similar to a traditional accelerator that we know of, and in what way is it different?
Absolutely. So kind of when I left Humana and entered the healthcare startup world, this industry doesn't cease to surprise me. I don't know if that's adaptive or maladaptive on my end. However, I was surprised to see that a large majority, it sounds redundant, large majority, but I don't have an exact stat, but anecdotally, I would say over 90% of healthcare entrepreneurs come from non-healthcare backgrounds. And this, was in 2018 through 2019. 2020, when COVID hit, floodgates opened and a new era was ushered in, right? There's a very distinct periods in healthcare. 1965, when Johnson put into effect Medicare and Medicaid. Then in 2010, when the Obamacare or ACA kind of came into the picture, and 2020, where COVID hit. So these have been significant milestones that have changed the industry as we know it. And once the Health and Human Services Secretary sent an email to all of us in March, or maybe it was April 2020, indicating that any form of really digital health communications could be now billable and reimbursable under a federal law. And with the exception, of course, of TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook Live, and Twitch, all other forms would be acceptable. In other words, the Health and Human Secretary Office of Civil Rights would not enforce HIPAA compliance with the platform being used, and you could bill for that visit. So what happened was that there was a huge panic and a rush and an excitement from the digital health and their investment communities around, wow, how do we capitalize on this? How do we get in the game now? You know, we always want to be in healthcare. It was always so complex. Now there's so many flexibilities. Well, how do we capitalize? And there was a funnel of these organizations that were established, and Carenodes started to work with some of these organizations offering viable solutions to really bring them into the healthcare market as a healthcare provider as opposed to a vendor. So as opposed to, you know, creating slides and circulating them to wherever you could find on Zoom info or LinkedIn or however you're sourcing your contact info to ask for a pilot or to see whether you can get a vendor deal. We got folks contracted with health insurance companies and first dollar in the door within 6 months.
Wow.
And that by definition is an accelerant, right? So our accelerator really was a operational support team that plugged into these digital health organizations and established payer contracts and network participation as an acceleration towards revenue generation from 28 months or more even to 6 months. And this was groundbreaking. And so essentially our accelerator worked on a membership model. And the reason I'm speaking past tense, because now we're post public health emergency period. And again, doing business in healthcare has become more complex. But what we've done is we've taken this experience we've had really working hands-on with each organization. We had one acquisition, another one received a $300 million Series C from led by CVS Ventures, and they became a unicorn, $1.1 billion valuation. So this strategy was really working and works, right, with digital health organizations that really want to get into revenue generation in healthcare. They need to consider the costs and benefits of becoming an in-network provider and select the market correctly. And you have to learn so many things that are really not pedigree, but lived experience. So you could be brilliant and you can have all these Ivy League degrees and so on, but lived experience wins in healthcare administration and healthcare business versus pedigree. So we kind of combined all of this and are now bringing a technology interface to market post-COVID so that folks en masse can then access the system and kind of accelerate their go-to-market if they are seeking to get contracted with health insurance companies.
I'll have a few follow-up questions on this, but I wanted to go back to your career switch because it's, for many people, it's a pivotal moment, like leaving a corporate job and starting something new, even if it's like a consulting engagement. So what was going through your head when you were making that decision? Was it so easy, or did you have to really like analyze and make this decision after careful study?
That's a good question. So I spent, about a few months when I was at Humana, right? Kind of as I was really addressing this huge Fortune 50 organizations problems, doing it so manually, I started to see, okay, well, what would be the business case to actually go ahead and bring a digitized version of what it is that we're doing to such enterprises. I had some money saved over for down payment on a property that I was hoping to someday find. And I just, bootstrapped my way across. Within 8 months, started generating revenue on a consultant route. So, my position being unique, where I had such a depth of experience across the continuum of care and across the flow of healthcare funds, that it really gave me a level of confidence that I wanted to apply and help providers that really could use knowing what it looks like on the health plan side, right? What leverage points am I not, aware of as a healthcare provider that I can pull and get better reimbursement or get a better deal, or, any number of administrative simplicities in a health plan partnership. So within 8 months, started generating revenue. I'm a person who likes change, and I'm a person who doesn't like to hit a ceiling. So there was analysis, but I felt pretty confident in my ability to, expand my reach to more than just Humana.
That makes sense, but I wanted to follow up on the Humana thing because I'm also curious about entrepreneurship. And it looks like what you saw was an opportunity for Humana to tap potentially and to leverage you as an entrepreneur internally. Was there a path there, or you felt like you mentioned there was a ceiling that only outside of the organization it could be accomplished?
I'm going to tell you a secret that's probably not a secret, shouldn't be. There's no one Humana, right? There's no one Aetna or CVS. There are a multiplicity of organizations that have been acquired, merged, a number of, different kind of subsidiaries. So even internally trying to identify, how you would even be in what you call it entrepreneur is a huge challenge within an organization such as Humana. I didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur per se. I really enjoy contract negotiations and developing healthcare delivery networks. So for me, it wasn't a thought of Humana to actually tap into their innovation lab. This whole innovation stuff came in when I left Humana and came into the startup arena. And okay, this is what they keep saying. This is what it is that their messaging is. On the other side of the, in the boardrooms, the corporate rooms at any one of these plans or any one of these large corporations, the conversation is really not as perhaps involved or engaging because you're constricted by regulation, by market dynamics, characteristics, and internal interests, right? I mean, we're people. So everyone is, needing to look out for themselves, but also keep a close eye on the vision. I felt that in the startup and entrepreneurial world, there was more cooperation and willingness to really engage in one's curiosity to find solutions. Whereas again, in a corporation, there's less of an opportunity.
Yeah, I've heard that in a corporation, you need to get a lot of yeses. In a startup, you need to get just one yes.
A lot of no's, right?
That's for sure. Coming back to your jumping into the entrepreneurial space, and you mentioned that this space has changed. Could you speak a little bit about the profile of an organization in digital health who you think is set for success with the right guidance? Like, what does this company look like?
Sure. Which stage did you say? I didn't hear it initially.
Like the stage where you mentioned that you helped organizations in 6 months not to become just a vendor, but to become an actual provider. So if I'm 6 months back, so what kind of a company should I have so that when I talk to you or hire Carenodes or use your digital platform that you've created or you're working on, that I can hope to shorten the time frame from, you mentioned, like 30 months or 18 months to 6 months to get that provider status?
That's a great question. Elements of readiness include funding, the ability to really think through and commit to a specific strategic pathway. Things can change. Yeah, and they do. But one shall not waver from the initial reason why they started this kind of program or strategy. One doesn't need to be any more ready than that. That's kind of what we do here. We're ready to go day one. There are some elements such as corporate practice of medicine that apply in 14 states and DC, where you would need to be a licensed provider, depending on the state, it's a doctor or maybe a nurse practitioner and so on, so that you can actually, or legally, I should say, own and operate a healthcare clinic. So this already becomes a barrier. And so it's not, readily something that technology folks with like coding background can easily solve for unless they go and find a doctor that they can partner with. And it's a extensive partnership. Literally, doctor will own 100% of the company that you've been working to build all this time. So what we do is then we help establish a professional corporation, and this professional corporation rolls up under the existing digital health, whatever Inc. might be, or LLC or whatever. And so through that pathway, that takes about, again, if outside counsel takes a very long time, but the minute we have that organization set up, then we flow right into the Medicare, Medicaid enrollment, commercial insurance enrollment, contract loading into your EMR system. And as long as you get at least one patient, that 6 months, then you can actually start generating that revenue. So we have a plug and play process that doesn't really adjust much to the specific medical group or client organization outside of the market level configurations that need to be done, right? So we have an overall process, and then we have 50 plus one different markets that operate in unique ways in this country. So then we configure, depending on the specialty and the markets of interest, kind of how will we implement this standardized protocol that takes 6 months to complete.
Can I ask a few very detailed questions, and you can give me very short answers on this, so
Okay.
that we go to other pieces. But there's a lot of good stuff you're saying, and I wanted to unpack it a little bit. So you mentioned the company needs to raise money. How much money is enough? Is it like 5 million, 1 million? What's the magic number?
Sure, there's no magic number, right? Like I said, last round being $300 million. Unless there's a patient acquisition strategy and a commitment, there's no short answer to this. It depends is the answer, right? It depends. Folks have come in with $50,000 to $100,000 of their own money. Folks have come in with upwards of, I said, $300 million of funding. We're literally doing the same strategy, just the scope differs, right? So are you focused on one state? Are you focused on many states? Are you focused on one specialty? Are you focused on many specialties? Are you going to be in person as well as digital, or only digital? So all of those then factor into how much you might need to raise and where you want to allocate those dollars.
So it boils down, as I understood, to custom acquisition.
Yep, exactly.
And you talked a little bit about the need of having a doctor on your team, or even the doctor could potentially own 100%. Could you talk a little bit how this is solved by someone who is a coder or comes outside of healthcare? How do they typically set up this professional corporation so that they can retain ownership?
Sure. I'm going to be careful about what I say, because the whole point of core practice of medicine is to not allow ownership by those who are not practicing medicine. However, there is a structure called MSO, Managed Service Organization, that's not clinical in nature and provides administrative support functions to the clinic, right? So at Carenodes, we have a very close and tight-knit, I should say, and highly qualified executive physicians that essentially step in and become a physician of record and are able to help guide, as the legal owner, kind of the remaining processes involved into actually bringing the clinic into the market. And we all know that it's a more or less a transitional solution, right? So what's happening is that you haven't found someone off the street who thinks that this is going to be their sole, job or venture, and now they're chief medical officer of I don't know what medical startup, and I've seen things get ugly, quite frankly, personally, very ugly. And so to kind of get out there and try to, it's not just finding the doctor, it's knowing how to set up your relationship. And the way we've solved for it is that we have doctors who know what the program is, and they step in, We kind of get that doctor whatever it is that they need, get the lawyers whatever it is that they need, and that's how we've been solving for it for those who are not from healthcare.
This is awesome, and I appreciate you giving those very specific details for people who are entrepreneurs, because this is like a booming space still. I wanted to follow up on the sales process a little bit. Just to clarify, you are talking about Medicare and Medicaid and Medicare Advantage. So your focus is primarily on federally or like government subsidized programs, correct? Not commercial or employer funded plans, or are you?
Necessarily. No, all lines of business. It's just that a bulk of our organizations have been kind of offering solutions that are more Medicare eligible, and as opposed to not. However, working with maternity organization, we've struck a deal with Blue Shield of California to provide services to commercial membership. So I've worked across, again, depends on the service you're providing and the markets you're seeking to bring your service into. But I've worked across all lines and products.
Now, I'm really curious about this because I've been to Boston last year. They had like a virtual first care summit, and they had a few folks from those big insurance companies like United Healthcare. They say, as long as you don't have like millions of patients, don't even come to us. It's like very high barrier of entry of even talking to these people. So what's the secret sauce for a smaller company to be able to get the foot in the door?
Excellent question. Really, the secret sauce is not so secret. It's getting patients. So through this strategy of getting fee-for-service contracts to be in network with the payer, kind of like the model that I described, one then is able to actually have a contractual relationship with the entity that they're seeking to upsell, if you will, and has the ability to go ahead and start incurring costs to the payer system by submitting codes, by billing and coding at greatest specificity. So you've signed a contract, you know it's a 1-year term or 2 or 3 year, rarely will it be a 3-year term for a fee-for-service agreement with auto renewals and a 90-day notice to terminate without cause. Your goal is to get the minimum number of patients that you need to send a letter and begin the negotiation processes. And add whatever value-based or whatever increased rates, whatever kind of contractual kind of wish list that you have, then you can start demanding for that. Patient acquisition is critical, and it shows that you have, as a provider, the ability to engage patients. And patient engagement, it's not about, the conversation isn't about this, but patient engagement is demonstrated by volume of patients. So if you go to the health insurance plan and say, oh, you know, we offer great digital services, et cetera, and insert the slides we've all seen. How many members do you have? How many patients do you have? Well, right now we are, there's no number. Okay. Well, how do you engage as members? Well, we were, thinking that you would send us patients. We were thinking that we would partner. It's not, as a health plan executive, it doesn't come across as a contract I want to give out, because they do not have, one, any of my current patients that I might want to reduce the costs on, right? So if you have 500 members, perhaps 200 are mine as whatever health plan I might be, right? So I'm suddenly curious and interested, because 200, when you're looking at a Medicare Advantage capitation at the plan level, could 1,000 to 2,500 per member per month. So 200 members are significant. I will be having a conversation with you and spending that time having conversation with you, as opposed to the other one who sent me slides and, is looking for a pilot and hoping that I send them patients. And I'm a contracting person. I don't even meet members. I don't know where they're coming from. I just know we have millions of them at the health plan. I cannot send you members. But if you can capture members, if you can capture patients and demonstrate that, then you're showing yourself as a competent organization, the market, that can actually help move the metrics that we've put on our slide decks and we've sent them to these executives as a outreach for a pilot or any one of these traditional approaches. So first, get a fee-for-service contract, get in network as a healthcare provider, submit claims. So you're showing costs on your side, in the payer system, and systematically start your negotiation processes. You've already started making revenue. So your competitors who are in that 26-month sales cycle they have 20 more months to go, right? So month 6, you're bringing in your dollar. And by the time a year passes, you're going to be able to actually negotiate these agreements if you focus on membership or patient acquisition.
And coming back to my earlier question about those profiles of digital health startups, were you able, or are you able to help those companies to figure those things out and to figure out their like patient acquisition strategy, or they have to be kind of in the space where they are on track to hit those numbers?
They have to have a commitment and the ability to kind of think outside of the Silicon Valley box and really give a high level of importance, because I could issue strategy and talk advisement all day long. But ultimately, if the strategy is let's pour in thousands of however many dollars into Google ads, and you're seeking to target hypertension patients to provide them RPM remotely, you're not even a primary care, you want to do it as a specialist, this is already not a good use of your time and money, right? So it's interesting because these kind of things seem logical to me, where if you get a contract and you get a patient, and if you bill against that contract for that patient, only then will you bring in revenues. It's not getting contract and waiting to generate revenues. That does not follow logically. The syllogism it doesn't follow. So when you do get a contract, you have to think about how you're going to monetize that contract. The way you monetize it is billing against it. So going down to the community level, engaging in community fairs, making calls to primary care offices if that's where you're seeking referrals from, engaging in annual open enrollment if you're targeting Medicare membership. So there's a multiplicity of ways that cost a fraction of what it is that's being spent on these glamorous conferences and these very targeted online ads. Fraction of that spent, and a tremendous yield as compared to, for example, the Google ads.
Awesome. Just to continue that conversation, the organizations that are in that space, you've come across a number of them. What are the typical mistakes that you see they make?
As of 2013, I've been observing, my observation has been this fixation on value-based care contracts. And it's a head scratcher, because remember, legacy healthcare does not like value-based contracts, right? Because they're about volume. This value-based contracting is not, I know it sounds good. Value sounds like a good word. It's not exactly always the best thing to do. Now, if you have no volume, then you have no inherent value. Number one issue I'm seeing is that patient acquisition becomes a huge pitfall for a number of reasons. I'm actually writing a Forbes article on. But a really curiosity for me is, what is the reasoning behind a stated strategy of value-based contracting? Why am I seeing so many LinkedIn posts and such discussion about value-based agreement, where it's such a broad term? And I just want to really put it out there that patient acquisition needs to be at the forefront of any strategy having to do with revenue generation. And expecting, if you're not a primary care or behavioral health organization, expecting the health insurance companies to send you membership or patients is not coherent, or it's not congruent with how the healthcare system does business. So really stepping outside of our comfort zone, putting in our cards on these digital ad platforms and selecting the boxes down to very great specificity. We need to be okay with putting a booth somewhere. We need to be okay engaging the community, sending a Promodora as someone who speaks the language of the community, engagement. There's a number of ways that could be done. That is my number one. That's the harbinger of doom when I hear folks saying two things: value-based care and online marketing. And when I ask how many patients do you have? they're coming in maybe one or two or none or 10. How many doctors do you have? We have 2. Okay. Well, you gotta work a little bit more than that value-based care contracting. You gotta go get the patient first. So that's number one thing I'm seeing. Patient acquisition issue.
In the presentation, I think it was the United healthcare person at the conference. She said, start with a vendor contract before you become provider, then do provider, then do value-based care. What's your take? What's the right moment, or is there the right moment to be a vendor versus provider? And is there a moment where value-based care starts to make sense?
It's a good question. An instance, and we're saying opposite things, her and I, in this discussion. Opposite things meaning I just don't want the vendor contracts, generally speaking, to begin with. However, if you are providing a service that's episodic in nature, has a very well-defined population, for example, maternity. We know the pregnancy episode, it's not ambiguous, has a beginning and an end. Typically, certain things happen. Typically, certain extraneous things happen. But we know very clearly, right, who the population is, when they're eligible. The health plan knows the beginning and an end to the payments. And going in as a, for instance, maternity network and taking a vendor contract that's value-based looking, meaning it's a set rate and you could provide more or less services, you're not going to get paid fee for service, then that might make sense. However, if you're a cardiology tech company seeking to do business in Southern Florida, and one, Southern Florida has the most cardiologists, and two, you don't really have an episodic condition, you have a chronic condition, right? So making that sell is going to take you much longer to become a vendor. What are you vending? What exactly are the devices? And we could put up these very nice models, 24-hour monitoring, escalations, etc. But ultimately, that pathway is going to take you so much longer. Why? Because there's a plethora of organizations emailing about RPM and our solution, etc. And there's onesie, twosie maternity organizations. First, saturation is the point I'm trying to make. And two, the ability to get these patients so that you can get paid for the technology that might not be reimbursable under any kind of code right now, right? You start to bill for clinical services so that you can fund your technology that you initially, founded the company for. And now you have to realize, okay, let me build insurance companies, get a doctor or a therapist to actually generate revenue for the technology. So it really depends, again, on the service you're providing. By and large, fee for service, then value-based is the way to go. And it's not just as a strategy to sell, but really organizational competency and capacity, because you're taking risk by definition.
Okay, that makes adult sense. Thank you for clarifying it. We started at the beginning talking about some changes post-COVID where the regulations came back. Are there any good developments in the industry or regulatory space that excite you the most or that create new opportunities?
Maternity is a huge space, so I keep talking about it. And it's rare that a majority of states would take a step in a single direction and change Medicaid benefits to cover certain, whatever it might be, outside of what federal law requires. Many states now have moved into providing maternity care under their Medicaid program for services such as doula services and services that are traditionally non-mainstream medical services. So that's a big opportunity that's come out of essentially recent regulatory changes that really, is going to catalyze a segment of the market forward, which is, again, maternity organizations. That's kind of the most exciting thing that I could speak to that is kind of uniform almost. I don't know about Alaska, has not been very quick, and Wyoming has opportunity, and I won't call each one of them out who needs to do what now. But by and large, we have a majority of states marching towards the same direction. And so that is definitely your epic or sterner moment, if you will, the right time at the right place.
And what's your take on the aging population, retiring boomers, and the whole caregiver industry? I've heard, in my previous episode when I was talking to Tina Galloway, She's advisor for Kepler, but she's also VP at Optum. She said there is a lot of excitement, especially on the side of bigger companies investing in that space. What's your take? Is it like overhyped, or are there real opportunities there as well?
There are certainly opportunities. I mean, when you're looking at the aging demographic, there's clearly opportunity. My concern really would be, how are we safeguarding ethically and morally, right? I mean, and clinical standards of care should already be a given, so I'm not even going to mention that. Safeguarding these now frail senior folks that are by and large going to be getting care at home, right? Because that's been the industry. Send them to home. So when you're sending them to home, you don't really see what's happening, right? Now you've contracted vendors Z or X, and they're supposed to go and do A or B to make sure patients, meeting criteria C or D. But the oversight, I'm concerned about that oversight, monitoring, quality control mechanisms, because, also a number of these contracts issued by the plan, sometimes the motivation is to check a box, right? Meet the regulatory requirement to get home-based providers now, or demonstrate that they have at least 10 visiting nurses in their network and so on. It's something checking the box. So when it's a checking the box as a motivation, then we might be skipping over how robustly are we thinking about monitoring quality control and quality improvement. That's my thought about that. I think that's any startup that could come in and somehow provide visibility to health insurance companies, kind of on the administrative side, outside of what's available, in care and so on. I could go into a lot of different interesting things that are happening. One thing I'm not seeing happening is administrative uniformity and administrative simplicity, to make sure that these folks at home are not just being taken advantage of in terms of a number on a spreadsheet that then goes up to some VC and they get excited and pour another few $100 million in, right? I don't want to be the senior who's subject to that. That's my thought.
What are some exciting initiatives that you are currently working on, or what excites you in the next 12 months that is going to happen with your business or with you personally?
Sure. I'm excited to, within the next 12 months, introduce version 2.0 of the Carenodes contract management and network management portal interface and dashboards, so that consumers themselves, consumers meaning whether individual practitioner or group, could go into the portal and have a platform to operate and conduct their administrative work and track such work, documents, and so on that have to do with network and payer contracts. In terms of some of my passion projects, I serve as the head of value-based care for a maternity organization called Mommy, and as a SVP for an Alzheimer's organization called Neurogly. And I'm really been focusing on bringing maternity products to market while working hard to bring the Alzheimer's market to a little bit more maturity, so that we have conversations to establish payment pathways for mild cognitive impairment neurology groups that are providing a whole bunch of services that show good outcomes. So these are my three things that have excited me, and I look forward to reporting on the progress and really seeing folks get access, right? I mean, it's rewarding to know some mom in Kentucky now has access to the app paid for by their Medicaid plan, and I was behind that negotiation. So she'll never know of me, I'll never know of her, but I know that they'll be there. So
this is awesome, and I understand that one of those is specifically Carenodes thing, and the other two, these are your clients or partner organizations that you are helping to deliver that impact.
These are some of them, exactly. These are the ones that I'm kind of further involved in, because I do serve as a fractional leader in the organization. But yes, they also use our portal and our platform, I should say, to conduct their administrative work.
I might have a strange question, but I
like it.
resist asking you, if you had the magic wand to change the healthcare system in the United States, what would you change it to?
This might get me in trouble. I would become the Health and Human Services. Another one that would waive, oh God, I feel like it's arrogant and also ignorant to make a statement about, if I do this, it's going to change everything to the better, because there are going to be unforeseen collateral damage, right? So if I were to wave the wand, I would suddenly wake up to a bunch of LinkedIn posts about value-based operations as an area of major opportunity we should focus on, and start thinking about, okay, if a vendor is going to bring you operational efficiencies, maybe you could do shared savings. So today, if it's $10 million costing the health plan to process these types of claims, if we make it 5 million, then let's get some percentage of share in that. We're far away from this conversation. That's why I would like the one to accelerate. But within the next 18 to 24 months, we're going to be taking a very strong stance on that, because we'll have data to support the efficiencies we brought on the admin side in terms of our platforms, efficacy, efficiency, and kind of fit within the market payer provider space.
This is awesome. So on a different note, what book are you reading right now, and what do you do outside of your numerous engagements?
Certainly. Good thing I read books, right? Marcus Aurelius' Meditation, I find to be very, and I won't go into the whole book review, but I just think it's fascinating that some emperors know to be taken years later and published into this classic book. And, his thoughts and kind of, they really are meditations. And so I really like Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. I've been kind of rereading that. I've also been reading a book by, I forget the author's name, but it's out of a Harvard project. It's called Yes, How to Negotiate. And I find that book has very interesting examples, from international negotiations down to, simple small business and their supplier negotiations and kind of tactics. Another book I'm reading is The Psychology of Entrepreneurial Business Decision-Making. And I'm also writing a Forbes piece on that to come, working with the editor to really finesse it. What was the question? What do I do outside of all this?
Yeah.
I like whitewater rafting.
Oh, that's cool.
Traveling with my family, boxing. I do like to be active, and spending as much quality time as possible so that I can bring into perspective all these technical and kind of, sometimes into the weeds things that we do. So stepping back and taking an assessment, bringing perspective, really by way of meditation or engagement in kind of non-monetary compensated opportunities, like serving on the board of nonprofit behavioral health organization called New Self-Awareness. So I keep myself busy.
It definitely looks like that. The book Getting to a Yes that you mentioned resonated with me quite a bit. And right now I'm also getting into like biographies or like thoughts of people who lived before us. And surprisingly, they resonate in so many ways with modern life. So I'm with you there. My last question, which is one of my favorites, is what advice would you give to your younger self?
Keep going. You're on the right track. And know that undergraduate studies and graduate studies were the easiest part. So just keep going. Also, I was a very young director. I was a very young executive already at a large health system. And I did experience microaggressions. I would tell myself, don't throw your weight. And I know this now, but then I would say, hey, don't throw your weight until you know where to throw it. And when you walk in, listen long before you talk. There's a saying in Armenian, but I'm going to translate it into English and it will sound weird. I guarantee you that. So the literal translation is best to sit and look like a donkey as opposed to open your mouth and demonstrate you're a donkey. So kind of saying, listening more than speaking, understanding power dynamics, and you could be a chief something officer or whatever, SVP, but if you don't have the respect and alliance of the people that you're supposed to lead, then this is not going to be an effective leadership. So I'm a fast learner. So if I were to, I've told my younger self these things, maybe I wouldn't have to experience learning them either by direct observation or by direct experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you for those insights and for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Igor.
And that's a wrap on today's insightful episodes. Carenodes is transforming healthcare processes, supporting startups, and creating job opportunities. Our guest's commitment to reshaping the healthcare industry is inspiring and influential. If you are a fast-growing healthcare company seeking top-tier software solutions, remember that Kepler Team is your go-to organization. Stay inspired, stay innovative, and stay tuned for more deep dives into the world of health tech on our podcast.